Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Michael Baldwin, the man long known as Victor Newman's most loyal legal bulldog and reluctant moral compass, finally snaps under the crushing weight of secrets, betrayals, blood debts, and years of psychological warfare, culminating in a night so dark and irreversible that it forever alters the balance of power in the Newman Empire, because it all begins quietly, almost deceptively so, with rain slicking the pavement outside Newman Enterprises and the city glowing like a wounded animal beneath the storm clouds. Victor standing alone in his office, whiskey untouched, staring out at the skyline he believes he owns, unaware that fate is already walking toward him down the corridor in the form of Michael Baldwin, whose footsteps echo not with confidence, but with a tremor of barely contained fury, a man torn apart by the impossible position Victor forced him into, defend the indefensible, bury the unburied, and sacrifice his soul one compromise at a time, until the moment arrives when Michael closes the door behind him and the click of the lock sounds louder than a gunshot, Victor turning slowly with that familiar predatory calm, greeting him with a smirk and a dismissive, "Michael, you're late," as if this is just another late-night legal crisis, another mess Michael will clean up. But something is different this time, something feral in Michael's eyes, something broken beyond repair. Because this is no longer about loyalty or strategy or survival, this is about the blood on Michael's hands that will never wash off, the innocent lives crushed under Victor's orders, the threats made against Lauren, the silent implication that no one Michael loves will ever be safe as long as Victor Newman draws breath, and when Michael speaks his voice is low and shaking as he says, "It ends tonight," drawing Victor's attention downward as Michael pulls the gun from his jacket, the metal gleaming under the office lights like a verdict finally rendered, Victor's expression hardening. But not breaking, because Victor Newman does not fear men, he fears weakness, and he sees this as a bluff, a tantrum, another emotional outburst he can crush with a few well-placed words, telling Michael to put the gun down, reminding him of everything Victor has given him, power, prestige, protection. But Michael laughs, a hollow, broken sound, and steps closer, raising the gun until it is inches from Victor's forehead, the barrel steady now, his hand no longer shaking, because the decision has already been made in his heart even if his mind is still screaming for mercy, and he begins to unload years of buried rage, accusing Victor of turning him into a weapon, of forcing him to choose between justice and survival, of threatening Lauren, of using fear as currency, of treating human lives like disposable assets on a balance sheet, and Victor fires back with equal venom, reminding Michael that every victory he ever tasted came from standing at Victor's side, that Michael is no innocent, that he made his choices willingly, that he is just as guilty as the man he now wants to judge, and for a split second doubt flickers across Michael's face, because Victor's greatest weapon has always been truth sharpened into cruelty. But then Michael remembers the night he looked into Lauren's terrified eyes, the night he realized Victor would never stop, the night he understood that as long as Victor Newman lived, there would always be another line crossed, another life destroyed, another secret buried, and the rain outside intensifies as if the universe itself is holding its breath, the city waiting for the outcome. And Michael presses the gun harder against Victor's skin, his voice suddenly calm, devastatingly calm, as he delivers the three final words that will echo through Genoa City for years to come. "This is justice." And in that instant time fractures, because Victor's eyes widen not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, a flicker of recognition that this moment is real, that the man in front of him is no longer his loyal soldier, but an executioner forged by Victor's own hand. And then the gun fires, the sound deafening in the enclosed space, a violent punctuation mark at the end of a lifetime of manipulation, Victor's body jerking backward as blood splatters across the glass and steel of his empire, the mighty titan falling against his desk, paper scattering like shattered alliances, and Michael staggers back in horror at what he has done, the gun slipping from his fingers and clattering to the floor as the weight of his actions crashes down on him, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he stares at Victor, half expecting him to rise, to sneer, to brush off death as he has brushed off everything else. But Victor remains still, shock etched into his features, the room suddenly silent except for the storm outside and Michael's sobs. Because in that moment Michael realizes that killing Victor does not bring relief. It brings annihilation. Annihilation of the man he was, of the illusion that there was ever a clean way out, and alarms begin to blare somewhere in the building, security rushing toward the office, the consequences already in motion, while across Genoa City the ripple effect begins immediately, Nikki waking with a sudden jolt and a sense of dread she cannot explain, Victoria feeling a chill crawl down her spine as if the ground beneath her has shifted, Nick haunted by the echo of a life defined by conflict with a father who may now be gone forever, Adam standing alone in the dark, torn between hatred and a grief he never wanted to admit he would feel, and Lauren sensing something catastrophic has happened even before the phone rings, because some bonds transcend distance, and when the authorities arrive they find Michael on his knees beside Victor's body, hands raised, tears streaking his face, not running, not hiding, because this was never about escape, it was about an ending, and as he is taken away. In handcuffs the questions explode. Was Victor really dead, or will the man who has survived explosions, imprisonments, and enemies too numerous to count cheat death once more? Was Michael justified or irredeemable? Will Genoa City see him as a tragic hero or a monster? And what happens to the Newman Empire without its ruthless king? But one thing is certain, nothing will ever be the same again, because in a single, thunderous moment the young and the restless crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed, delivering a story about power, corruption, loyalty, and the unbearable cost of moral compromise, reminding everyone that even the strongest empires are built on fragile human souls, and when those souls finally shatter, the fallout is absolute, unforgettable, and devastating. And yet the gunshot is only the beginning, because in Genoa City death is never just an ending, it is a catalyst, a virus that spreads through every relationship, every secret, every lie ever told, and as Michael is dragged from the office the weight of what he has done continues to mutate inside him, memories crashing together in violent waves, the first time Victor saved him from disbarment, the countless nights he justified crossing ethical lines just this once, the times he told Lauren it was over, that he was done, knowing even as he said it that Victor's shadow would always stretch back across their lives, and the rain outside turns torrential, as if the city itself is weeping or perhaps trying desperately to wash away the blood that now stains its most powerful throne, because within minutes the news leaks, not officially, not cleanly, but through whispers and frantic phone calls and panicked texts, security guards murmuring, executives fleeing the building, sirens screaming through the streets. And Nikki Newman feels it in her bones before she hears a single word, her hands trembling as she grips the edge of the bed, the familiar terror of losing Victor slamming into her chest with brutal force, because no matter how many times she has sworn she is done with him, no matter how many betrayals she has survived, Victor Newman has always been the gravitational center of her universe, the sun around which her chaos orbited, and now that sun may have finally imploded. While at the same moment Victoria is in a late-night meeting, sharp and controlled as always, when she suddenly can't breathe, the air thickening in her lungs as an unexplainable dread takes hold, her instincts screaming that something has happened to her father, something irreversible, something no hostile takeover or strategic maneuver can undo, and Nick, ever the moral counterweight to Victor's darkness, is hit with a nauseating mix of anger and grief, because part of him has spent his entire life wishing for a world without Victor's manipulation, without his cruelty, without the endless wars, and yet the idea that someone, especially Michael Baldwin, could have pulled the trigger fills him with a cold, hollow horror, while Adam, alone and isolated as always, reacts differently, his first response a bitter, disbelieving laugh, because of course Victor Newman wouldn't go down so easily. Of course this would be another rumor, another exaggerated crisis, and yet beneath the cynicism there is a crack, a raw, exposed nerve, because for all the damage Victor inflicted on Adam, for all the rejection and emotional brutality, Victor was still the axis around which Adam's identity revolved. the man whose approval he chased and despised in equal measure, and if Victor is truly gone, then Adam is left with a terrifying question. Who is he without the enemy who defined him? And as the police secure the scene and paramedics swarm the office, the image of Victor Newman slumped behind his desk becomes instantly iconic. The conqueror finally conquered, the king bleeding in his own castle. But even in apparent death, Victor exerts control, because confusion reigns. Conflicting reports explode across the city, some claiming he is dead on arrival, others insisting he still has a pulse, still clinging to life. Through sheer willpower, and that ambiguity alone is enough to destabilize everything. Board members scrambling, alliances forming and dissolving in minutes, vultures circling the Newman empire before the body is even cold, because Victor built his legacy on fear, and fear does not disappear just because its source may be gone. While Michael, sitting in an interrogation room under harsh fluorescent lights, finally breaks completely, his composure dissolving into raw confession. Not excuses, not denials, but a devastated admission that he couldn't see any other way out, that he felt trapped, hunted, morally suffocated, and the detectives exchange glances, because this is not the cold-blooded killer they expected. This is a man who imploded under the unbearable pressure of serving a monster for too long, and yet none of that erases the reality that he pulled the trigger, that he aimed the gun, that he said those 3 words, "This is justice," as if trying to convince himself as much as Victor. And Lauren arrives at the station in a state of absolute collapse, her worst nightmares made flesh, because she warned him, begged him, pleaded with him to walk away, and now the life they built together hangs in the balance, her love for Michael warring violently with the horror of what he has done. And when she finally sees him through the glass, her heart shatters, because the man staring back at her is unrecognizable, hollowed out by guilt and shock, and all she can think is that Victor Newman has claimed another victim even from the brink of death. While back at the hospital, the Newmans gather in a tense, agonizing vigil. Nikki pacing like a caged animal, Victoria demanding answers from doctors who can offer none, Nick simmering with rage and confusion, Adam lurking on the fringes as always, half invited, half excluded. And when the surgeon finally emerges with a grave expression, the room seems to tilt, because the words that follow are deliberately careful, devastatingly precise. Victor Newman is alive, but barely, the bullet missing his brain by fractions of an inch, yet causing catastrophic damage, leaving him unconscious, unstable, and facing a long, uncertain fight for survival. And that revelation detonates a new kind of chaos, because Victor alive is more dangerous than Victor dead, especially now, because if he wakes up he will remember everything, the betrayal, the humiliation, the face of the man who dared to pull the trigger. And there is no force on earth more vengeful than Victor Newman wronged, and the Newmans react in fractured ways. Nikki clings to hope with desperate ferocity. Victoria immediately begins calculating how to protect the company and the family from what Victor's recovery could unleash. Nick is torn between relief and dread, and Adam feels a twisted sense of inevitability, because of course Victor survives. He always does, death itself refusing to claim him, while across town Michael is informed of Victor's condition, and the news crushes him in an entirely different way, because now there is no finality, no grim closure, only an endless limbo of consequences, a future defined by courtrooms, vengeance, and the possibility that Victor will wake up and destroy everything Michael loves with a single word, and that knowledge is almost worse than knowing he had killed him, because at least death would have been an ending. And as the days pass, the fallout spreads like poison through Genoa City. Alliances fracture, secrets surface, long simmering resentments explode, because Victor's near-death experience acts like a mirror held up to everyone who ever compromised themselves in his name, forcing them to confront the price they paid and the damage they enabled. And when Victor finally opens his eyes, the room falling silent as machines beep steadily around him, his first gaze is not confused or afraid but cold, razor-sharp, burning with the memory of betrayal. And though he cannot yet speak, everyone in that room knows the truth. Victor Newman has returned from the edge of death, and he will not forgive, he will not forget, and Michael Baldwin's act, meant to be an ending, has instead ignited the most dangerous chapter of all, because in the young and the restless, Justice is never simple, redemption is never guaranteed, and the cost of challenging a titan is paid in blood, broken souls, and consequences that echo for generations, leaving Genoa City forever altered by the moment. Michael Baldwin raised a gun, spoke 3 fateful words, and proved that even monsters can bleed, but also that some never truly die. And still the story refuses to rest, because in Genoa City survival is not forgiveness, and Victor Newman's slow, defiant return to consciousness becomes a ticking time bomb that no one can defuse, the air in his hospital room thick with unspoken terror as doctors caution patients while everyone else counts seconds, knowing that once Victor regains his voice the reckoning will begin. His mind already working behind heavy-lidded eyes, cataloging betrayals with surgical precision, remembering the feel of the gun against his forehead, the sound of Michael Baldwin's voice, the contempt wrapped inside the word justice, and that memory alone fuels him through the pain, because Victor has never needed kindness or mercy to survive. He has always fed on anger, and now that anger has been sharpened into something lethal, while Michael sits in a holding cell staring at the wall as if it might swallow him whole, replaying the moment over and over, the weight of the gun, the certainty that gripped him when he spoke those words, followed instantly by the crushing realization that certainty is a luxury no one truly has, because consequences always arrive faster and harsher than expected, and Lauren becomes his anchor in the darkness, visiting when she can, reminding him that he is still human, still loved, even as the world seems determined to reduce him to a headline and a cautionary tale. And outside those walls, Genoa City fractures into camps, some whispering that Michael did what no one else ever had the courage to do, others condemning him as a traitor and a criminal who dared to challenge a living legend, while Victoria quietly consolidates power at Newman Enterprises, presenting a united front while preparing for the possibility that her father may never be the same, or worse, may return stronger and more ruthless than ever. Nikki battles her own demons, torn between relief that Victor lives and a haunting fear of the man he will become after staring death in the face. Nick questions everything he thought he believed about morality, power, and accountability, realizing that even his hatred of Victor cannot justify the chaos unleashed by a single act of violence, and Adam watches from the shadows, understanding with painful clarity that Victor's survival means the cycle will continue, the wars will resume, and no one will ever truly be free of his influence. And when Victor finally speaks, his voice weak but unmistakably commanding, the first name he utters is Michael's, sending a chill through everyone within earshot, because that single word promises vengeance wrapped in patience, a long game played with smiles and silence until the moment is right, and as legal battles loom, alliances shift, and old wounds are ripped open, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Michael Baldwin did not just pull a trigger, he shattered the illusion that Victor Newman was untouchable. And even though Victor survives, that illusion can never be fully restored, because somewhere deep inside the Titan knows he came within inches of oblivion at the hands of a man he thought he owned, and that knowledge changes everything, setting the stage for a future defined not just by power and revenge, but by fear. Because now Victor knows what it feels like to be hunted, and Michael knows what it means to cross a line that can never be erased, and Genoa City, caught between those two forces, braces itself for the inevitable storm, aware that the echoes of those 3 final words will continue to haunt every corner of their lives, proving once again that in the young and the restless, the most dangerous battles are not fought with guns, but with choices that can never be undone. And as the dust continues to settle, the emotional aftershocks grow more insidious, because the true damage is no longer measured in blood or headlines, but in the quiet moments when characters are alone with their thoughts, forced to confront who they have become in the wake of that gunshot. Michael lying awake at night in a narrow cot, haunted not by Victor's face, but by his own reflection, realizing that the line he crossed cannot be uncrossed no matter how noble his intentions once felt. While Lauren wrestles with an unbearable duality, standing by the man she loves while mourning the version of him that existed before Victor pushed him to the edge, and Victor, confined to his hospital bed yet more powerful than ever, absorbs every whisper, every look, every hesitation, learning who flinches and who stands firm, because survival has taught him something new, something colder, and as Genoa City watches, waits, and whispers, one chilling certainty takes hold. This was not the end of the story. It was the moment the rules changed forever.